happy Friday. We're going to talk about the exciting thing of budgets and the process of applying at Maui College and in the University of Hawaii system. All these things that, well, maybe I don't get excited about the process for applying, but I do get excited about budgets. But before we go into that, I felt like we could do a little bit of review from last time and have an activity around that about the solicitations, because I feel like that's one piece. If you have the solicitation and you can understand it and read it, that'll give you the information that you need. So by either the little emojis or by just talking, how many people, did anybody look at a solicitation between now and the last time we met? And it's okay if you didn't, but did anybody look at one?
Just prior to our last one, I had looked at one, so recent.
Okay.
I've looked at them before, and I skimmed through the ones you sent us. Just, skimmed over them a little bit.
Yeah. Did any questions come up or things that you, by looking at them previously? So I know a lot of you have experience looking at solicitations before. Is there questions that come up or anything that is confusing?
For me, it wasn't confusing, but one of the pieces that you needed to know is you need to click on their links to find out if you met criteria, which was really helpful. But you had to use their criteria. So just making sure you read all the fine print to follow their guidelines.
Yeah, I think that's an important point that I didn't even talk about or think to mention, but sometimes solicitations have links to additional information outside of the solicitation. So then you have to incorporate that information too. For example, there's Department of Labor, and Department of Ed, I've seen both grants where they say, check out this link on our how we manage indirect costs, or check out this PowerPoint, these PowerPoints on our website. And they provide a whole bunch of additional information that if you didn't catch it, you'd probably be disqualified or have done the budget or other pieces of your proposal wrong. So you have to be really cognizant of that and aware and looking for those types of things.
One of the ones I looked at had Excel table of schools that could be eligible and for different things, and it was color coded, and all the colors were, at least to me, very similar, and so yeah, that was somewhat annoying.
I attended a webinar too about that same solicitation, and I was surprised at the people, because I'd read through it really thoroughly, and I was surprised at the people that presented weren't knowledgeable about the intent of the solicitation. They grade the solicitations, that they do that piece, but they really didn't understand them. Like, it was a medical education solicitation, and they really didn't understand the medical piece at all. There were a lot of questions they couldn't answer, so I don't know if that might be something you could address.
Yeah, and I don't know which one that is, but I think
it was an HRSA.
Okay, and I think sometimes, I mean, this happens a lot, like as grant writers and I imagine sometimes program officers, they might not have the technical details. And so, for example, a couple weeks ago, I had to write a grant about distributed energy resources. The first few conversations that I Zoom session in, it was just over my head, and I'm just like writing down notes until I could catch up, right, and look and come together with something, right? So sometimes the people who are helping with the grants and so forth the people who understand it. Like the Department of Education being another one where they have webinars where they just read the solicitation and they really don't have any answers, questions beyond that. So they call it technical workshop, but they read the solicitation. Any questions you have, they refer you back to the solicitation, and their frequently asked questions list where they publish it in writing, so they don't want to give any additional answers to. So I think we're gonna start off with reviewing a solicitation and a few questions. So I just want you to spend a few minutes. Maybe I'll give like 10 to 15 because it takes a little bit, but I have questions. Does anybody see the file that I put in there or not? Because I put it there right before everybody came in. Does anybody see a document?
No.
Okay, that's good. Now I know how it works. That was my experiment. But now it goes to it. Okay, we have activity. Oh, I'm sorry. There was a question about budget. And we'll get to that when we talk about the budget. I think so the question is, do you know if grants are not approved on the budget alone? Yes, definitely. I had a grant once that I misunderstood, and ORS did too because they reviewed it. Everybody misunderstood the instructions with how a form was completed. And so we had the right numbers when you added things up in the budget, but because the form was not completed right on budget, even though like A plus B equals the total amount that they needed or wanted, because it wasn't the same. This was the cost share on the budget, so the cost share had to equal a certain amount. They rejected the proposal. It's so frustrating. So yes, they do reject on the budget over. I've heard with like the budget's over by even $1 or proposal. So I put in the solicitation documents. Does everybody see that now?
It was a blue bullet. I did not have a blue bullet. No, it was blue. I saw it.
Yes, I see it.
Okay. Okay, so then I have some solicitations here. I'm going to just put a few in the chat box and you can choose which ones that you might want. So I'm going to put Ohua, Kanaloa, Zandra in a room together. So I will put the EOC and talent search solicitations in there. So EOC, you probably want to just focus on one or the other for the amount of times, if EOC or talent search. And then Amy, well, probably as a group, it might be good to focus on just one for now. So put a couple in there that people might be interested in. I have the Native Hawaiian Education Program that could be widely used for different things. I have the NSF eye test. And I'll put the TACT grant in. These have already passed, but I think some people might have interest or it might be coming up. I'll put the SPECO one in, the USDA SPECO one in. So I'll make some groups. We'll have about 10-15 minutes to go over, there's another person. We'll have 10-15 minutes to go over and answer the questions of the activity one. And as a group, I'd say just choose one solicitation and answer the questions just by skimming through. You're not going to have time to read. I find a helpful thing sometimes to do when you're looking at solicitations is either looking at the table of contents to find information or doing a word search. So you can do a file search, or I think it's edit search in PDF, and you can search for the words that you are looking for.
for our last question. So that helped.
Yeah, what did you find or have problems finding?
I think we were pretty good as far as finding the answers and trying to look for it.
So it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
It felt pretty straightforward. Did anybody have stuff that was confusing or was hard to find?
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
Which one did you guys do?
We did my eye test grant. That's probably like the most complicated one out there, I feel like. I don't know, Melissa would know better between the different ones.
It's an NSF grant. I think they're kind of they're fairly similar.
Okay, it's quite lengthy, and so just trying to figure out the different components. We didn't even finish. And some of the answers we needed to refer back to like the PPNG, the guiding principles.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, when I clicked to download, it didn't even finish downloading the.
Yeah, and that's a good point. There's a lot of agencies, NSF, USDA, that have other guidelines than what you get in front of you. So you have to look at two things, and the PPAG is really long. It's like some couple hundred pages. But USDA too refers to other documents, so that's a good point. We talked about a little bit, but I'm not familiar with all of the funding agencies, just the ones that we apply to a little bit more than others.
Yeah, and even within like where we're talking about the funding, what funding is available, and there's different categories of funding within the solicitation. So being able to differentiate between what we're actually applying for within the solicitation.
It's quite complicated sometimes to find the information pending the different types of grants. Anything else? Any thoughts about it when you were looking, or just oh, I didn't know they had this in it, or anything else?
I think when we were looking at the EOC, we were looking at the amount that was awarded, and so it was a like from 236K to 1.2 mil, and so that was it, because when we look at our own, this is how much we're receiving and the number of participants. So it was just being aware of those things.
So that makes it seem like it's kind of competitive. Is that what you're saying? Or are you talking about the number of participants you serve based?
Yeah, number
the
of
minimums?
participants and the amount of money that we receive, and looking at those, the ask and the grant.
Mm-hmm.
On the eligibility requirements is interesting too, because even though like the grant that we looked at, we met all the eligibility requirements, but it had to be self-sustaining. That kind of.
Amy, I don't know if it's just me. We're having some hard. I can't hear you very well.
Try again. Can you hear me now? The eligibility one of the things that even though we know all the eligibility criteria, from a practical standpoint, the worksheet that we would have trouble with would be the self-sustaining piece. That was a requirement of the grant. That was part of the criteria. And we would have a hard time with eligibility.
There we go. I heard you a little bit more in the last part. Something about sustainability and eligibility, but I couldn't hear a lot. I think when you're closer to your device, we can hear a little bit better.
I'm wondering if that placement of our hands was like covering our microphone, because I know I've done that once or twice. No.
Time for a new computer.
Wait, when you're closer, we can hear you. Just so you know.
Okay.
There.
What I was saying is we met all the eligibility criteria for the grant, but one of the pieces is that you had to self-sustain the grant after the termination of the grant. And that would be the piece that UHMC would not be able to do.
Yeah, and it might be worth looking at. So I'm not familiar with that particular one, but I could take a look and see. Sometimes we can, if it says you have to sustain this program exactly as is, I mean, that would be tough, right? But if it's saying you have to sustain components of it or aspects of it, that might be something that we could more easily make a case for.
There are also ways to be creative about how to fund it. Heather was trying to fit one of these criterias, and they came up with a clever trick for funding it. And so, if you're creative enough, you might be able to swing it.
Yeah, so sometimes there are ways. In most cases, I wouldn't let that stop me from applying for a grant. But there might be cases that would, because like I said, I haven't read this one. So, okay, we're gonna go on to talking about budget. So I'm gonna share my screen. Oops, wrong place. Okay. Thank you, Nasi, again, for your help with allowing me hosting privileges. So here we are with budget. So solicitations, one way that we think about and we discuss if we should go forward with funding. So this is a nice little chart. I'm going to share the PowerPoint. I have to say I borrowed information from Cheryl Reeser. A few years back I did 6 sessions. We went into depth about writing a grant. It was helping people through the process of writing a grant or getting some project ideas together. This wasn't intended to be that, but so she had some slides that I used, but I'll send you everything so you can look at and refer to later. But when we read the solicitation, we're thinking about, can we apply? Are we eligible? Does this make sense for us? But it's the same with a budget. If you see, you want to look at the budget. And I often start with a simple budget because, as people have alluded to, there's maximum amounts for funding. There's different ways that you're expected to spend your money in a grant. So then you have to look at, do we have adequate key personnel and support staff for this project? Yes or no, right? Do we have adequate facilities to support the project? Do we have adequate equipment? Can we commit to cost share requirements? So some of the solicitations require cost share. That's where the institution has to put forward money as part of the project. That is a lot of work. We have some of them now where you have to find either in-kind match people's like salary and time, as well as sometimes there's been ones that require cash match. So in order to get, say, $1 million, we have to put forward 200,000. And that's an issue when money is tight. We don't generally just have $200,000 we could dedicate to a grant proposal. And then, is our mission consistent with funding priorities? So that was when we referred to the strategic plan. And then do RFP funding levels, so solicitation, does the funding levels meet our needs? And will budget restrictions pose any type of problems? So you want to think through this. For example, we looked at the registered apprenticeship program grant solicitation last time. And so that budget required a lot of money to go towards apprenticeships, training, and wraparound services, and they wanted us to serve like 200, for $1 million, they wanted to serve 200 participants. That seems like a lot, but when you're supporting a year-long, helping pay students for a year-long apprenticeship and providing wraparound support, it doesn't go very far. So then we might not have enough money to even run the grant or move the grant forward. So that's why it's good to develop your proposal early on. Also just to get a sense of the numbers for your proposal. So the budget is important. It's your financial story. And I've mentioned this before, but I'll mention it again. When I'm reviewing someone's proposal, if I look at the budget, I pretty much can see what you're doing. And it really gives me a clear picture where you're dedicating your money to and how many students you might be serving or participants or whatever else it is that you are doing. So it's good to spend some time and thought on that. It's a blueprint for your project objectives. So this is how you're going to achieve those objectives. It really does tell you how the project's going to be structured, and it reveals if the project is carefully planned and feasible. So if you're talking in your narrative about this college tour, you're going to go to Oahu, but you don't have that in your budget. Or you're talking about the third-party evaluation you're going to do for your research, but that's not in your budget. Your reviewers are going to see that. So it's good to just think through everything that you might need in your proposal, and that should show up in your budget. And it's a planning tool once the budget is launched. Yeah. So the components are usually direct costs. So these are the costs that you are using for your staff, for your the things you might need to buy, the supplies, and the services that you're doing. And indirect costs. So you might have heard in your project, if you have projects or had projects about indirect costs, this is the overhead, the actual estimated real costs for having extramural projects, which are grant projects. So this is facility usage, electricity, utilities, admin time, and then general costs that cannot be contributed or attributed to a specific project. So direct costs, in the uniform guidance, this is pretty general, that the cost should be allocable, meaning that you should be able to say that this is going to your grant. So we couldn't pay for, it'd be hard to pay for example, Louis' time, because he's spread out over everything. It's not just to us, or electricity charges, because it's not to us, right? So allocable is like staff who are working on the project, supplies you're using for the project. Allowable, so that's based on our UH policy. There's something called the Uniform Guidance of federal regulations. Usually your solicitation will tell you what's allowable, not allowable. If you have questions, you can always ask me, or you can ask OAP. And then reasonable and necessary for the project. So most budgets and proposals also require a budget narrative where you talk about and detail what you're going to do with your line item expenses. And so that's where you're showing that it's reasonable and is necessary to perform the work that you're going to do. So indirect costs are also known as F&A, so facilities and administrative costs. So this is actually a negotiated rate with the federal government. It's based on real numbers and formulas. We want to pay this. I know for a while everybody wanted to waive the indirect costs because it seems inconvenient, but our institution needs this. It is the real costs of having a grant. So when you're calculating indirect costs, you'll see I'll share a budget template, and we're going to work on it a little bit together. But things that don't have indirect costs are equipment, participant support, so it's like tuition, stipends, travel that's specific to a student, like flying a student for a college tour or for services. Office leases, we don't usually do that too much of that. And over $25,000 of a subaward, which sometimes we get into with evaluation costs. So these are what the indirect cost rate, IDC, indirect cost rates. Oops, where did it go? Do you see my PowerPoint? It just stopped. Today is not my day for do you see the okay, you see it again? It just shut down, restarted, but here we are again. Okay, so indirect cost rates. We have, oops, different rates. It has by year, it changes. So there's an ORS link I have in the budget template that I shared with you. I'll share with you again. And I can help you update these, but it's for different situations. A lot of what we do is instruction. So even if you're doing training and workshops, that usually falls under instruction. So here we are in coming up on fiscal year 2021 at 45%. And sometimes we do research, so that's been going towards the 45%. So typical budget categories, we have personnel, salary and fringe, and travel. So that travel is even if you're doing buses to events, that falls under travel, mileage, parking, equipment. So equipment has a specific definition. A lot of times when we think about equipment, like our computers, we think equipment, but it's not equipment. Those are supplies. So computers and different things are supplies. Because they're under $5,000, and an example of equipment, like maybe you need a special, I don't know, let me think, a special something to do some kind of analysis, and it's over $5,000. For the Maui Food Innovation Center, for example, they needed like a heavy-duty mixer and assembly line things like bottle fillers, an example, and each one was over 5,000, so that would be equipment. Supplies, so again, your computers that you need are your supplies. Participant support costs, so participant support costs are the tuition, stipends, travel that's directly allocated to a participant. So if you get a bus, that's not directly allocated to a participant. But if you fly by an airline ticket, then that's a participant support cost. So if you feed your participants, that's participant support costs. And then contractual services, so consultants, evaluators are contractual. Construction we usually don't have, it's usually not allowable for a lot of grants. And then other costs, so software and printing and publications. We usually, I would say, always put a line item for like 500 to 1,000 with printing, and then software would be different software that you might need, and then the indirect costs. So, as I said before, you want to do your budget early, and let's do one together. So, I need a volunteer project. Does anybody want to volunteer their project?
EOC.
Okay.
Yes, pick one.
No, okay, we'll do it. Let me see if I shared my screen or if I, do you see an Excel file or not? Yes? Okay, good. We're just gonna do 1 year. Let's think through this. So what kind of staffing would a program, oh, Xandra, for those who might not know, do you want to just say a couple of sentences about what EOC is and what they do?
Sure. So our project is designed to provide services to students who meet certain criteria, certain eligibility. And that criteria is that those participants have to be low-income students, first-generation students, and students with disabilities. And so some of the services that we provide will assist with helping them with college admissions, high school, making sure that they graduate from high school, apply for college, apply for financial aid, and enrolling in school as well. And we also continue to provide those services each year to those participants interested.
Okay, great. So, okay, this is everybody's time to participate. So you heard a short overview of the program. If you're thinking about that, what kind of staff might you need for the project?
Some type of liaison with the high schools. Maybe multiple people to liaise with different high schools.
So some kind of
advisor.
An advisor, yeah. That's normally what we might call them.
Are you thinking like a marketing person or?
Let's see, advisor, liaison. So maybe a couple of those, right? It depends on how many students they serve.
Probably a program director as well, the overseer.
That's important.
So it sounds like this may or may not be accurate, but we're just kind of putting it in there. But it sounds like they need to get a lot of participants, right? Sandra, did you share how many participants you serve?
I didn't share the number. We serve, let's see, get my number, I confused them all. Jump in, because I know it's
1456.
56, yeah. 1456.
So maybe, I mean, you wouldn't have to do this. I don't think the current structure has this, but I don't know, it's changed since one I was a little bit more familiar with. But maybe you do want an outreach coordinator, right? Because that's a lot of work to get 1,500 or so participants. So I actually know an upper bound program that, not here, not on Maui, but another program that hired someone to do all the recruiting of students and getting their applications in, because every single EOC student has to complete an application. So they actually hired someone in an upper bound program to do that work. Let's see, and maybe these positions would be 100%. I don't know, the outreach coordinator. What does everybody think? Should the outreach coordinator be 100%? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. Which will make things a little bit easier for everybody, right? And so I'm just going to put some estimates of salary. These aren't based on any real numbers, but I make a lot up when I do it. There's my calculator. Okay, so this is 12 months. So 1 month. So let's put credit in. Let's say this may not be the case at all. So Xander, please forgive me when I'm putting these things in here, because you're like, I don't think so. But maybe they want an instructor to teach some sort of course like college readiness. I think there's like IS 103, like career exploration or something like that, right? So maybe that's, we're gonna pay for 3 credits for someone to teach that. So if you see here, it says number of months or number of credits. So we put in 3 credits times, I usually just estimate about 2,000 per credit. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less, but that's my estimate that I use. For project director, I might put in, I put in like 65,000, just random numbers. So 5,417. So that equals 65,000. Advisors, maybe I'll put in like 45,000. So I'm just dividing by 12 to get these numbers. And maybe an outreach coordinator, we'll put that at the same rate, just for simplicity. Okay, so then we have fringe rate. So if you see, I have a link here.
Melissa, did the advisor monthly salaries calculate right?
No. Here we go. Thank you. So you always have to check this and the formulas. I don't like roundup. Okay, so you need to round it, otherwise sometimes it doesn't add up. Like you'll have cents and you'll be off by dollars and you'll get really frustrated when you're trying to submit your proposal. And OEP and ORS. So OEP, Office of the Extramural Programs, that's our Cheryl and Denise and Lonnie and Cody. But Cheryl primarily reviews the budget, and then it'll go to Office of Research Services. And so then they also review the budget. And if it's off by $1, they're going to keep sending it back to you until it works out. So that's why we have in the formula here, we have round. So that makes it generally add up a little bit better. Okay, so fringe rate.
What is round up? Does that give a certain percentage? Does it round up to a certain percentage? Or I'm sorry, I just don't know what round up is.
Oh, round up means if it's like 25 cents, it'll round to $1.
The next dollar up.
Yeah, thanks. So then that link goes to these wonderful fringe rates. This is UH fringe rates. And you can just Google RCUH fringe rates, but UH fringe rates for faculty and staff are 62.49%. Casual hire and overload. So overloads like your faculty that you're paying to teach a course. Casual would be someone who just maybe you're hiring for a couple weeks to teach a summer course for high school students or something like that. So that's UH fringe rate. And then we have RCUH. I'm just Googling RCUH fringe rates for our RCUH employees. That's published too. It changes every year. Fringe benefit schedule, that's what we want. And you skim to the back of it. Same thing. So they have the regular employee. They have something that's over 13 months or less than 13 months. Because retirement hits after 1 year, so then the fringe rate's higher. So after 13 months, it's at 36.03. And then they have the same thing with intermittent employees are 9.39%. So let's say these are RCUH employees. So it's 36.03 is a fringe rate. Oops, let's make these equal the same. Oh, I had updated this. This isn't the one I updated. I think. Oh, no, it is. I just maybe thought I just did it different. Okay, so 36.03. And then outreach coordinator, we'll say they're at the same rate, 36.03. So that's basically an RCH regular employee. The instructors, faculty overload, so that's 2.12%. And then we don't have anybody in these positions. Okay, equipment. Do you think EOC needs equipment?
I would probably say so. I know that we have a printer that we have to do printing and stuff like that, but
Has to be over 5,000 though.
yeah, so I think we bought all our I think we have all our big heavy items, right, Sandra? Jesse, Kanaloa? I don't think I foresee us having anything over 5,000.
No, not that I know of.
Do you guys have a bus or anything, or that I guess that might be travel? But I was thinking that would a bus, if they had a bus pickup or transport, would that be travel or would that be an equipment like a bus that they had to buy?
I would think if they're buying the bus, that'd be equipment. paying for the gas and whatnot would be travel. But if they're renting a bus, that would be travel.
Gee, I never thought of our program buying a bus or a van.
Or even needing one, yeah. The thought.
In case you need a van driver too.
It
Ooh.
sounded like Upward Bound needed a bus last summer.
We'll say maybe they need bus rental. So maybe they have college visits to UH Maui College. Maybe they don't. I mean, we're just kind of talking through this, right? So, but say they do need a bus to bring participants here for like financial aid events or a college tour, applying for colleges. Generally, they might go to the schools, right? Because that might get more students. But we'll just say they need buses, maybe maybe only 4 times, or maybe just 8 buses per year. So I'll leave the days there, it doesn't really matter. And each bus rides maybe about
400, I would say, because of
round trip. Yeah.
So about 450, give or take, depending on if they come from Lahaina or upcountry, as opposed to the Maui High.
So we'll put bus rental at 8 round. We'll figure this 8 round trips at $450. So that calculates for us. So equipment, probably not one thing over 5,000, but one thing that we ran into previously is that if you're going to be mass printing thousands of copies, that a printer under 5,000 may not be as easy to use. So printer copiers, things. I mean, I don't know if I put that in this budget though. It might be risky. But we definitely need educational supplies, right? What kind of educational
textbooks, maybe programming, those kinds of things.
So that might be kind of higher, right? Because that sounds, I don't know. Maybe.
I don't know. I think we tried to, for EOC, I think we had to spend down. So I think we bought like a lot of textbooks and books to be distributed to our students that we were working with. So that I could have been like in the 30,000 or 20,000 in the educational supplies.
And that kind of makes sense. If you have, I mean, if you have 1,500 participants, so 20,000 divided by 1,500. Oops. It's only $13 per student. So if you even said 100, so maybe you want to think like, let's go by participants. You have 1,500 participants times maybe
$20.
An average of $50, an average of $25. Oops.
Yeah,
so we'll leave it at that. But I mean, that would be a good way to think about it, right?
Okay.
When you're doing your budget. Travel, does EOC need to travel?
We did for professional development and trainings. So yeah.
So maybe 3 flights to the mainland. 1,500 is usually a good estimate. You could be generous and put like 2,000. Lodging, there's actually Okona's rates, but we'll say each trip is like 5 days at I don't know, like $100 a day. And then, oh no, that would be per diem, sorry. 5 days at maybe $250 for a hotel, like in Washington, DC or something, per diem. Oh no, so lodging maybe would be 4 days, but then travel might be 6 days. So that's your per diem at about $100 per day. So you can go to eTravel. The eTravel gives you rates and links to figure out a little bit closer. But this is just a budget estimate, so it just needs to be within reason. No one's going to question if it sounds like about what you might pay. No one's going to question it. And then ground transportation and miscellaneous. So maybe you need to rent a car and gas, and this might include your parking or other fees, shuttles to the hotel, something like that. So that would be for, oh, I'm sorry, that's for 3 people, but then 3 times 4, so you have 3 flights, right? Because you have 3 people traveling, so that's 12 days. 3 times 6 is 18. 3 times 4 is 12.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense now. I was just like, okay, wait,
Yeah.
something's missing. Okay, perfect.
Yeah. Sometimes I've updated this template to have another column with the number of travelers, but I can do that and resend it to everybody. But basically, you need to think through how many days you have per how many travelers. Inter-island travel, what does everybody think? Might they need to do inter-island travel or not?
We would, just to visit the Molokai staff and the staff to come over to Maui, and the Molokai staff travels to Lanai to service those students there. So yeah, travel is definitely part of that.
Okay, and how many days or times to how many sites?
I would say if we went over, we did travel maybe 3 times a year. And they can be back and forth. We really have to spend the night.
So 3 times per year to Molokai, 3 times a year to Lanai.
Both, if what would be necessary, and then having them to come to us as well. So
if you have participants come to you, is that travel, or might that go somewhere else?
So we're talking about the advisors on Molokai. We want advisors on Molokai as well.
Yeah,
that will come
sorry.
to us.
So how many times might they come here?
We would say maybe 3-4 times.
Okay, we'll just do 3. So that'd be just to make it make sense right now. But so three times a year. So here we go. We just caught something, right? There's advisors like maybe on Maui, right? But then you just said there's an advisor somewhere else, right?
Yes.
Advisor on Molokai and Lanai, right?
No, just Molokai. Molokai
Right.
Advisor Services Lanai.
Okay. So, and would this, do you think, be 100% time?
Yes.
Let's just, okay. Let's just say for the purpose of our demonstration, maybe it's 50% time though. You know, let's go back and change it. So if it's 50, whoops, I've changed the formula here. 50%, and still not quite right.
Do you have anyone on, like a faculty or a facilitator on Oahu, on Lanai that you have to pay or consider?
No, not for the EOC.
So if it would be part-time, the rate for a part-time employee, and this is why I did it part-time, but be 9.56% if it's an RCH employee. Okay, so going back to our inter-island travel, so per diem, so say 12 days, 1 day travel, and then ground transportation, say maybe they're renting a car plus parking. So renting a car per day, Is it more expensive there for Molokai or Lanai? Would it be like 60, 80? What?
It's more expensive on Molokai for rental car. Malik, do you recall what that might be?
No, I don't recall, honestly.
Yeah, but it's more than here.
Let's say 100, and that would include parking too. So we'll just put 12 days. So then we got subawards. Do you think EOC would have subawards? For non-EOC people too can jump in if they have ideas and thoughts.
What are subawards?
Subawards, maybe we'll put this as contracts. Subawards or contracts, doesn't necessarily have to be a subaward. Could be something else too. But subawards are where we're partnering with someone and we're doing some kind of contract that they influence part of the project. So, like for example, on our NSF iTest project, we have to have a researcher. The researcher influences the project outcomes, the objectives. The reason we need that is because we really don't have an expert here on Maui at our institution that can do it. So then we have to develop some subaward as a specific thing that needs to get approved to, or else it means part of our money is going to them. Like they get a chunk of money and then they need to manage that money and report on that money, and they're subject to audits by the federal government and so forth. A contract would be like we also do contracts with evaluation. Evaluation could be a subaward or a contract, but that would be that you're paying someone maybe $10,000 to provide evaluation on the project, which is assessing the quality and giving formative and summative guidance, feedback, and assessment to help your program achieve their objectives. So those are ideas about that. Sometimes we contract, for example, there's agencies that do contracts for providing curriculum, providing training, rentals of supplies where they come in and they set up like a tent and take it down. Might be a contract. So those are like vendor services where you're paying them to do more than just buying goods. They're doing a service.
So would this be where our like Blooming usage will come in, or our National Clearinghouse things items will come in here, or no?
I think those would come in others. So what you're talking about, and you're general for everybody, but you're talking about a database, which in this case is Blooming, right? Or student access or whatever that is. And what is it like? Is it like 1,500, 2,000 a year? I don't know.
I'll just guess a number because I don't have it in front of me.
I think it's 15.
Yeah, 15 sounds familiar to me, but I'm not sure. It's been a while. So copying and printing, they have a lot of participants. So maybe we want to make that a little higher. Usually I'd at least put 500 to 1,000, but they have a lot. So maybe I would put like 10,000 or maybe 7,500 or something like that. I don't know.
Alyssa, is there a guide where 50 or less participants use 500, 100 to 500 participants use $1,000? Is there any kind of like little scale that grant industry or whoever uses that we can kind of follow to have an idea?
It varies so widely by what you're trying to do. Are you talking about for the overall costs, or are you talking about just for copying and printing and supplies?
Okay, so forgive me because I'm very brand new at this. So let's say I know I'm going to have 10 double-sided pages plus one pamphlet for each participant. So I would take everything that I'm anticipating on sharing or passing out printing, and then I times that by however many participants.
Yeah. So that's exactly it. I don't think there's no guidelines or rule of thumb. I think you would write that then in your budget justification, that this is, remember we talked about allocable, so it's allocable to the project because you need it to give the participants information. It's, what is it, allocable? No, I forgot the other one. It's allowable. Yes, it's allowable, and it's reasonable because you need a way to give this information to your participants. So you would just justify it in your budget that this is the estimated cost and the reason why it costs this much. So then, any more questions about that? I think anything, if it seems unreasonable, just in your line item budget, you just want to put extra care into justifying it in your budget narrative and explain we need this because of X, Y, and Z, and it ties into us achieving this objective that we have. So basically you're tying it into what you hope to accomplish. So this would be in the other section. We have any kind of license, software, licenses, so forth. So if you need to buy Microsoft Office for your computers, Adobe Professional, and whatever else that might be. I don't know how much that would be, but we'll just put it in there. That would go into other, if you have what Xandra I think mentions is the institutional membership for professional development, possibly. That might go in there.
Melissa, back to the travel area, would we include if we were taking students or participants anywhere, would we include that in the travel as well?
No, I forgot I updated this form since before, but no, let's do this. That would be like, we'll do participant, do a header above this. I'll have to fix the formulas too, but
Do you have to pay rent for the facilities that you use at all?
You're talking about on campus?
Yeah. Either Amalagai or Lanai, sorry. Do you have to pay rent to any lodging or facilities?
Not that I'm aware of. I think that's all a part of the indirect costs.
yeah. We don't generally charge any type of rent or anything like that for programs. So this column here calculates your indirect costs. So all of your salary and fringe is subject to indirect costs. Your equipment is never submitted or subject to indirect costs. That's things that are over 5,000. Your materials and supplies are submitted, are subjected to indirect costs. One thing I forgot to put in here is like working stations. So I usually don't call it desks or desk sets, but I say working stations. Maybe in the justification I might say computer, desk, so forth. So maybe let's see, how many staff do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh wait, we never put this person here, but 5 like full-time or regular staff. So maybe the first year we want to get 5 desk sets, and we'll say that the whole thing is going to cost $2,500 per person. this budget will have to, what happens, you develop your dream budget, and then you have to keep cutting and cutting and cutting until you make it work out, as you will probably find. But okay, so participant support costs. So if they travel, so maybe they're gonna take, I'm not gonna say that this necessarily makes sense, but you might want to do a college tour to Manoa, and maybe you're going to take, I would want as high a number as possible here, because you're serving 1,500 participants. So if you're only taking like 12 students, I think that would be a question for the reviewer, like why are you only taking 12? But it might not work out, but I would say like 50 or 40, maybe 40. And then what's the day cost for travel? So $250 for the flight. Maybe you're gonna pay $15 for food for them, and you probably have to rent a bus, but that would be in a different place. So maybe $265 per person times 40. So maybe I added that. So if you were to maybe do, well, if you're going to do a class, we already have the instructor. We're paying for the instructor cost, so you don't have to pay tuition. Is there any kind of stipends or direct support for students?
I don't think so.
Not on the stipends or anything.
No, no
Okay.
stipends.
So the wonderful thing about EOC and Talent Search and some of these other Department of Ed programs is that the indirect cost rate is restricted or capped at 8%. So this is the percentage. Remember, we looked at it as like 45% for education, training, and research. But for Department of Education programs in the solicitations, say, and you'll have to watch for this in your solicitations for other programs, it says the direct cost or indirect cost rate is capped at whatever it is. So in this program is capped at 8%. So this is your total of this column, the costs that are subject to indirect costs. And then that's here, and that calculates there. So then we kind of work through a budget together. Is there any questions or thoughts about that?
This was helpful.
Was helpful.
And so then this kind of tells you what you can and can't have, and then you have to keep cutting back, and it helps you to do it before you start your narrative, because then when you're writing your narrative, if all of a sudden you say, oh, that outreach coordinator position didn't work out because it costs too much money to have that, even though we feel like that would be best, then you have to realize you're not going to be writing about it or talking about what the outreach coordinator is going to be doing if you had to cut that position in order to make the bottom line of the budget work out. So that's why it's helpful. Or for some of you, you're going to be deciding how many participants you serve based on what your budget can be. So initially, maybe you thought, oh, I'm going to serve 100 participants. But then when you do your budget, you realize you can only serve 50. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. And check in with everybody. Oh, so we're going to do one more thing. I wasn't able to see my chat when I was doing this. Do you round up only salaries? Oh, okay. I'll look in the question box. Sorry. Do we round up only salaries? I round up anything that would, or round. I don't like round up. Oh, look, there's a balloon that appeared in back of me. But I round anything that would cause it to be dollars and cents. So when you look at the formulas, you're putting in a percentage, so then you get dollars and cents in that. So I round those. I round fringe because fringe is always going to be a decimal. And then I round indirect costs because that's always going to be a decimal. So that's how I think about it. But other things are whole numbers, so they'll never be. The other thing I forgot to mention that reminds me of when you're doing multi-year projects, so like EOC only submits the first year of the budget when they apply for the grant, but some of you will be applying for grants where you have to allocate for 3 years or 5 years. And so every year I usually use either 3% or 4% increase in salary, because that tends to happen. Maybe it won't happen right now because of the things that are going on with the pandemic and enrollment, what's going to happen to enrollment and so forth. But I try to plan on it, because otherwise that can really hurt your budget if you're planning 5 years. Or I know like Europe, 7 years out, you have to keep decreasing costs every year. Would mileage be a part of travel expenses? Yes, they would. We didn't put any mileage in our sample budget, but oh, tied to mention, got it. But you would calculate it and use the e-travel. I don't know, I forget what it is right now, the rate, but you look it up on an e-travel, it changes sometimes yearly. And so say for like ELC, they're going to travel to Hana, and say that's like 100 miles round trip or 80 miles round trip. So then they would do 80 times, I don't know, 0.45 or whatever the going rate for mileage is. And they would times, maybe they go 6 times a year. So that would be included. Would there need to be travel funds for the little night or Molokai students to travel inter-island? Yes, if that's what you hope to do, that would have to be in there. Okay, so there's the questions. We're going to move on about process really quick, and then we're going to wrap it up. So let me share, let me get my PowerPoint ready. Okay. So the submission process, and I share this because if you're thinking about writing a grant, you need to know about this, but the submission process has a few steps. Right now, we're in the write proposal phase. That's what we're talking about. And that's why I encourage you to start now if you can. If you have an idea, even if you don't have a solicitation in mind, it doesn't hurt to start building a concept, a one-page concept paper or a summary of your project. It doesn't hurt to put out a budget. You might have to keep adjusting it, but then you have some ideas. It doesn't hurt to start looking at data points or what things might indicate a need, or evidence-based practices to help meet that need. Because sometimes the solicitation comes out and you have a 30-day turnaround for some of the Department of Education grants, or 45 days. NSF usually puts their dates out there years ahead, so that's nice. USDA sometimes has it again with a 40-day turnaround or so. So it's really hard to do that if you haven't started. So that's why I encourage everybody to start now and think about what they're doing. Another, an optional step, we have this agency called TIG, the Implementation Group, and they will review your proposal. So that's really nice because they are experts in what they do, and they can give you some expert guidance on how to strengthen your proposal. They give guidance like never before that I've ever had. They're great. So I did, what?
Is that for all types of grants?
Yeah, anything. Except for like, I would say if you're doing like a county grant or something like, I'd say if it's something like 75,000 or less is probably not worth having them review. But if it starts getting the 75,000, 100,000, it might be worthwhile. Like I wouldn't send a someone asked to send a county grant to them the other day, and I'm like, nah, that's not quite appropriate. So I say ideally, well, I'll talk about this more in depth, but then in a second. What was that?
Someone asked if it was a free resource.
Yes, it's free to us. The system pays for it, so we can take advantage. They love Maui College. They love us sending stuff to them. So because they don't have a lot of business from the community college, so they're really helpful in that. So that's step 2. Step 3, prepare in sponsor system if applicable. What that means is sometimes there's different systems to prepare. And so I'll go into more depth in a minute. Then we have to route it on MyGrant. So that's for getting approvals internally. And then ORS, so ORS is the Office of Research Services. They review it and then ORS submits it. So we cannot submit a grant ourselves. Not even Louis can submit a grant. He doesn't have authority. We don't have authority. So the writing proposal, so this is what I said before, you can start writing your concepts now, read the solicitation carefully, which we've been working on, and know that there's other things than just your proposal. There's commitment letters, budget justifications, and other things. So I usually start, besides the budget, I do start with the budget a little bit, but I also do a summary and see commitment letters first. So I mean, this is once the solicitation comes out, but say you have a 30-day turnaround or a 45-day turnaround, you need to get those commitment letters back. So as quickly as I can, I put together a budget, I write my summary, and then I go on the phone and emailing and asking everybody for those commitment letters to my proposal, because usually it takes a few weeks to get them back from people. So I want to give as much time as possible for that. And this whole process will take you longer than you expect. So plan lots of time if possible. I think it just generally takes way longer than you think it will. So then there's the TIG review. The implementation group is the UH System Grant Review Consulting Group. I can connect you. Generally, that's been working pretty well. If you're already connected, you can go straight to them. Or if you're thinking about it, I'll connect you early and they can help you plan in this stage too. So they can also help you look at funding ideas. I really recommend them. So I said 4 weeks is ideal. 6 weeks is even more ideal, because if they can give you an internal review, you can submit changes, give it back to them, and then they might send it to an external review source that are experts in that field. So that's really helpful. And also, if you're last minute, they'll still work with you. So sometimes I find out that I need to submit a grant and I have like 3 weeks or 2 weeks. So sometimes they're on the East Coast. So sometimes you can give them a grant before you go to bed. I'm always like thinking out my hours, right? Okay, is it 5 hours to 6 hour time difference right now? It's 6 hours. Okay, I need to get it to them by 2 a.m. So it'll be in their inbox by 8 a.m. And then while you sleep, they'll review your grant. And by the time you wake up, usually they have it back to you if they know it's a rush. So they'll work with you in the final days right before your proposal if you need that. So prepare a sponsor system. What this means is that what this means is usually funding sponsors have a grant application system. So federal programs tend to use grants.gov or like NSF Fastlane. Like state, county, and private tend to have their own systems. Like Kamehameha Schools has their own systems. OHA, the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, has their own system. And watch out for those hard copy submissions. Like the county sometimes have hard copies that need to be sent to them, and sometimes we require wet signatures or actual original signatures. And so to get those signatures, we can't sign. Remember, it has to be ORS, the Office of Research Services. So to get those hard copy signatures, the people who we work with are in Hilo. So then things have to be routed through mail. And it takes a few extra days, and it takes a few extra days to mail them to the sponsor. So just watch out for when hard copies are needed. It complicates things a little bit. I can always help prepare a system. If you haven't went into grants.gov or NSF Fastlane, it can be difficult. And Cheryl's an expert in that as well. I go to Cheryl with my questions for budget and for like the ORS stuff because she used to work for ORS. So a tip is to complete the sponsor budget before routing a MyGrant, because sometimes the sponsor budget will route differently. or I'm sorry, not route differently, will calculate differently. And so it's good to then be able to go back and update your budget justification in your Excel file to match what the sponsor system is calculating for. So routing in my grant, you would need to sign up for an account. I'll send this slides to you as well as a little step-by-step process I have with tips for applying. There's a conflict of interest form that needs to be filled out. And a tip is that even though I would say ideally you're routing 2 weeks ahead of time, 1 week it starts getting minimally like, okay, we need to get this routing today. You can route it even if your narrative isn't finished. So as long as your budget is complete and finalized, you can still route it and then keep changing out your proposal document until it's ready. But you can't route it if your budget's not complete because people are reviewing the budget more so than anything. And so this goes to key people for approval. So you'll have to approve it. So say if you have a couple other key people on it, they'll have to approve it. If you submit it, you don't have to approve it, but your key people would have to approve it, deans, vice chancellors, someone from Office of Extramural Programs, which is usually Cheryl and Louis, and then it goes to Office of Research Services. And it's good to just let people know, hey, heads up, this is routing, especially if you're in the last day or two. I mean, you can probably get it routed in a day, but ideally you would try a week, or ideally 2 weeks, but a week would be sufficient. And then there's the ORS review and submit. So the Office of Research Services must review it. Our contact is Nozomi Kanoho, and they're the only people who can submit a grant. No matter how small, we do not have authority to submit the grant. They must be the one to press submit for it. So that's it. Any questions about the process?
No.
Let's see, how long did it take from start to finish write submit the Gear Up grant? So the first time, and I'm just going to share this because if first you don't succeed, try again. The first time I submitted the Gear Up grant, I was told we were submitting the Gear Up grant, and I had 2 weeks to write it. And they're huge and they require one-to-one match. So not only was it writing the grant, but it was also getting the match commitment from potential donors. And that's where we messed up on the cost share form and it was rejected. But we came back and we had time. So I think, and I can tell you that because this is what I do. This is what I do. It wouldn't take me quite as long, but I spent at least a month on that current Gear Up proposal. But I would say that you, within your normal job and the things that you need to do, if you're seeing students, if you're teaching classes, if you're doing your work, a lot of the times it would, those things that make it harder to get grants done. So I would say start months in advance, because by the time the solicitation comes up, then if you only have 4 weeks to do something like a Gear Up proposal or an EOC or talent search proposal and you haven't started working on it, that's all you're going to be doing, and you're probably going to miss some sleep too. Any other questions?
How long would it take for the routing process if we start writing and completing the grant months in advance? Can we start the routing process months in advance, or do we have to wait on the competition to come out to start?
Yeah, it doesn't make sense because you won't be able to finalize your budget until the competition starts and the solicitation comes out, and until you know your bottom line, because sometimes they make changes that affect your budget.
Okay, thank you.
The route is not so bad. I mean, if you can get it routing 2 weeks ahead of time, that's great. 1 week generally is plenty of time. I think in the UH policy, ORS says they want to have a grant 5 days, business days in advance to review. But gosh, sometimes there's just so many things that we as a college want to go after. So, I mean, the bare bones minimum is like the day it's due, if I can get it into ORS's ready to review pile and everything done by 8 a.m. by the time ORS starts in the morning, but you don't want to always be in that situation. It doesn't feel good. It's not fair to them. So
There are some grants that don't go through ORS, is that correct?
only internal grants.
Like the Perkins, I don't think went through ORS.
Yeah, oops, sorry. I just clonked someone in the nose with my elbow. Yeah, so Perkins is internal. So the UH system is awarding that grant. So the UH system has the money, is awarded the money, or the state, but it filters through the system. So it's more of a contract for work. There's other ones too, like for example, I think there's an NIH grant that people do quite a bit here, and that's it's awarded to the UH system, and so then they do internal grants. So that doesn't need to be submitted by ORS, because the official applicant for all our awards is the University of Hawaii. So I'll help you with that. On the ORS webpage, there's a profile. It says like the official applicant, the official address, phone number. It gives like DUNS numbers and cage codes and any other strange thing that you might be asked for in a solicitation. But they, sorry, I just went down the different rabbit hole. But I'm sorry, I just was distracted for a second. Amy, what question was I answering?
I think you answered mine, so I'm good.
Okay. I was going to share something that I felt like was important, but I forgot. So that's okay. It wasn't that important, and you'll probably never remember all these details. But if you get this sense of this is the flow of how it needs to go, you'll be good. So my last thing, I had scheduled a time for June 5th, and I was going to prepare some worksheets that you could individually, if you have projects in mind, work on a one-page summary or objectives and goals and review budget and so forth, kind of doing a meeting for a peer review of work that you've done. If you're working on a solicitation, we could review things like that. In my mind, I was thinking like, well, maybe we could just kind of keep going, like have a meeting every 2 weeks to help people keep writing. I know that like Christine is working on some projects. It sounds like a lot of you work on projects, but I was just thinking, okay, if there's, it's hard to work on these things when you don't have a motivator or deadlines to do it, in addition to all the other things that you do. So I was just thinking, okay, if we meet every 2 weeks, we could do some peer reviews. What did you think about that? Okay, well, I'll just offer it. The other thing is June 5th, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to be here. But I think that everybody together could review their stuff, and then I could maybe join in after that. I'm just going to have a surgery done, and I'm going to be out for, I think, 6 weeks or so. But I think after 2 weeks, I might be able to join in the group, possibly. But I guess the question is, do you want to start it and continue it now, or do you want to wait like a month? Start it now without me, so a couple meetings where you work together, because I think that you can already give each other some great feedback, or do you want to wait like a month? Okay, we have very few, not a lot, maybe a month or 2 weeks, but okay, so maybe, okay, so maybe I'll schedule a meeting starting in July. Friday mornings. If someone really wants to be involved in Friday mornings don't work for them, let me know. But I'll just put it out to listserv. Anybody who's wanting to work on grant concepts, and then maybe I'll send you some worksheets that you can kind of get started on your concept paper, objectives and goals. Which, if for like EOC and talent search, that's not what you're going to be doing. Right? You're going to be working on your grant. But if everybody can bring pieces that they're working on, then we can focus on that, make I'll think about it a little more organized. And if you have ideas, that would be good too, but maybe it's a email before and people can look ahead if they can. But if they can't look ahead, I don't want that to someone from attending. So maybe it's kind of like, okay, our focuses are these things that people are working on and they have this question. So, you know, please review these paragraphs and tell me what you think about this or whatever that is. Or can we look at my budget together? I think we all can learn from that too. So it's just the concepts. If it works, I think we can just give it a try, just even to be a motivator for everyone to keep going on their projects. So maybe after the 4th of July, then, if everybody seems kind of on the same page, or I'll send out a meetup thing to figure out when it's best. That's what I'll do. Sorry, brainstorming in the moment, but I'll find a time that's best for everybody. So thank you all.